I couldn't find out how to remove the cutter head for a replacement or for a helical head, so hopefully this helps you. Always ensure your machine is unplugged, cutter blades are sharp, so wear gloves or tape up the head, neither of which I did, and yes, I did get cut. And you will need Allen keys, 22mm socket, a hammer and a large spanner for hitting. It will make sense later on. Okay. This bar, by the way, this roller, if you have one of these, never pick it up from this, because this is barely kind of in there. It's just meant to transfer bits of wood over the top of, not for picking up the whole unit. This, by the way, just holds up the other side of that. Anyway, moving on. How does this come off? Aha! That's a smaller Allen key. Trying to keep things bunched together so I don't lose certain tools. Now, I don't know yet if it's necessary to take both of these sides off, but I did look to see if anyone had broken down one of these online and I couldn't find it anywhere. So while they might have done, I couldn't find either YouTube or forums or anything else where that had been the case. Those are the two rollers that feed the rollers, and what makes the magic happen is this right here. This is what drives the spinning jobby. Does look like there might be a spring here. So I guess I've got to be careful when this comes off that it doesn't just... No spring on this side. If this works, I might have to just set this to music as its own independent video just to show how to take these buggers apart. Right, well, we didn't go shooting off, so that's good. Oh, I did it! Fantastic. Oh, that's so awesome. Right, we're going to leave that with that. That's that off. Seems like that goes in a keyway in there. So that has a little keyway section that's going on just in the bit underneath there that my finger's at. And take you off. There's a bearing there as well. So we've got to try and get this out of that bearing. Mind you, I can probably take these off now. And just unscrew that out of the way. Boom. Right, so now we can unscrew this and that should give us clearance for that. Don't know if this is the best way to get the belt off, but it's working. There's pressure behind one side of the belt. There we go, and we're off. Right, so now I'm wondering if I remove this screw altogether, which I think is going to be these two nuts here and some stuff, I might be able to access the three that hold this whole section in. That might come off. Aha! So that comes out there. I'm going to pop those two back in there so I don't lose them. Right, now I've got access to these bolts here and whatever this red thing does around here. So, what size are they? They are a 4. Right, so that's going to stop that pinging everywhere. Now, in an ideal world, I'd pull this off and then be able to pull that whole thing right out. Nope, obviously not. Oh, you bastard. Now, what I'm wondering is if I can gain access. I've never really taken this apart, to be honest with you, but I'm imagining that if I undo these, I might have access to the blade. Aha! Yes. So I'm going to pop these back in here so I don't lose them. This earth lead is worryingly close to these blades, so I'm going to see if I can tuck that away a little bit. Anyway, back to the task at hand. This is where you're going to need to use a 22mm socket head, nice and cheap from the shops, and I've wedged a bit of wood in the existing cutter head to stop it spinning when I undo it. Once the pulley comes off, there's a little keyway, little thingamajig that you've got to take out there, otherwise you're not going to be able to get very far. But that fits inside the pulley itself. Now, you don't probably have to take everything off at this stage the way I've done it. However, you will have to take those pieces off eventually, and this is how I approached getting the cutter head out. Super easy to just pull out at this point. Now, these bearings do need to come off. I didn't have a special tool for that, so I just made sure these mole grips were resting on the bearing and pelted it with a hammer until it came off. It's a bit of a thug way of doing it, but it did work in the end. Now, with the new cutter head, you will get some replacement bearings, so that means that I wasn't overly concerned if I broke these. However, they seem to be perfectly fine afterwards. Again, not an ideal solution, but it worked for me. This little nubbin on the end here, this simply unscrews, just a regular old thread on that one, and that goes into the new head on the end. And what this does is it drives the rollers, so it's geared inside to make sure that the rollers go at an appropriate speed to the speed of the blade. But yeah, it goes in super easy. It doesn't have to be crazy tight. Job's a good one. Now, in this bag, these are the new bearings that came with the head, and these are the ones that I'm putting on. Now, at this stage, I put the far end one on at a perfectly fine time. This is reasonable. I used my dog holes to get the bit that I just screwed on, and then just tapped it on. Everyone's a winner. And lots of support, and that worked perfectly fine. However, this is where I did make a mistake, because then I decided to do the other one as well. I got it on, and as you'll see in a minute, we'll need to take that off again, because there needs to be a bit of metal that goes in between that and the thingy. Now, because this end was a lot harder to get on, I haven't realised my mistake at this point. I did use some parallel clamps just to squeeze it on with some bits of wood, and that made sure that everything was fine and dandy. Trying to feed this in without cutting myself. This, again, is another reason why you should put the blades on after you've installed the head, not beforehand. And it was at this stage where I couldn't quite understand why there was such a gap until I realised that that cup has to go on the bearing. So this is the bit that you have to do before putting on the bearing, the last bearing that I did. The larger of the two. So once I got them all out again, then I just smashed this bearing into that cup, and then the cup and the bearing could go onto the head, and then I could use my clamps just to twist them up to make sure that everything got in there nice and snug. Then it was a case of just knocking it in place to make sure it fit. The outside bearing cover goes on then. You'll see that key once again that goes into the pulley wheel to make sure it doesn't slide off. And at this stage, I just thought it was a case of kind of banging the pulley onto it, and everyone's a winner. I did, however, forget, even though I just offered it up seconds earlier, I did forget to put the bearing cover back on. So that's it right there. So now that pulley has to come off again, and then the bearing cover goes on that covers the bearing, funnily enough, and then the pulley goes on. I know I'm making this sound more awkward than it should be. However, when you're looking at it, it's pretty straightforward. I was just rushing at this stage and was being a bit of an idiot about the whole thing. But no, it's pretty straightforward. Then I'm finally putting the spring in that safety switch. And like I put on the screen earlier on, that safety switch just means that the blades can't turn when the blade guard is off. Made sure that that flat low profile nut is back on, and I did it up with the impact driver. This is me just showing where the safety is, where the switch goes, and how the cover stops that, or makes it release the blade, if you like. Just a couple of Allen keys to tighten that bad boy up. Now you can see that that blade is moving freely. So what I can do is then replace the belt and make sure that's all hunky-dory. Then it's a case of going back and doing basically the reverse of the earlier part of the video. So now I'm putting the height adjuster, the main height adjuster screw in, and yeah, straightforward as you see it. This is a case of you just kind of got to get it in there so things make sense really, but that bearing has to run pretty much flush with the base there. Then you've got a bearing cover that goes over that, and then over the top of that is a little washer that goes on before you put the cog on. Or the gear rather than a cog. But there's the washer. Pretty much covers the bearing. You can see the keying again inside that cog. You can see where it goes on the jobby, and then we've just got to tighten that back up again. Putting this main rod in was something that confused me until I realized those little shoulders were on those bits, and they actually fit inside the sort of the arms that are poking out from the underside, and that means that the cogs or the gears will engage fully. I kept putting them on upside down. They weren't engaging fully, and I was getting very concerned and annoyed about the whole situation until I'd realized I was being a bit of a melon. On the height adjustment side, we're also adding that spring and we're pushing that in. Now, this is the way that we'll adjust the height to make sure that everything's square a little bit later. So that spring has to be there to allow you to disengage that particular cog. And that means that, as I say, we can make sure that we have the planer running at a nice flat square edge. So now what I'm doing is I'm just raising up the head there, or the whole unit, and I'm measuring it to see if we do need to make any adjustments. Now this is something that you can fine adjust once you've got some stuff going through, but as you see, you push the sprung cog in, and then you can move the height adjuster around to make sure that you've got both sides being as high as each other. Does that make sense? Should do. But once I've made a few cuts, if I use any particular wide pieces of wood, I can obviously get some verniers on it and see if there's any micro adjustments that need to be made. Then the sides are going back onto the machine. Relatively straightforward, nothing to get too concerned about here. I was just making sure that the slots all lined up with one another. You don't have to go too crazy with these Allen head screws at the top of these. Just give them a little bit of a wedge and a little pinch up, and job's a good one. Make sure you fit the bar before you tighten up the second side, because that'll need to be sandwiched in. Once again, don't pick up the machine with this bar. Then the dust attachment goes on. I'll leave a link to that down below. And if you want to see how this cutter head performs, if you don't have one, you just stumbled on this video, then go and check out the video that's in the description. I've linked the review to this particular helical head. And if it's been of use, please do make sure that you subscribe and check out future content. Thanks very much.